Welcome, everybody, to the second episode of Rackets United. This has been a passion of ours to really share stories from the industry, stories from our members, and we are absolutely thrilled to have with us Chuck Gill today. Chuck is the current USTA Florida President. He was a former national president of the USPTA. He was also on the National USTA Board, but more importantly than that, he's been a lifelong tennis professional, director, and has been in the industry for years and years and years. And we're not going to put ages on it or measure anything like that. But Chuck, thank you for being here, and thanks for joining us today. Love to hear just a little background about you and how you got to where you are today.
Thanks for having me. Years and years and years and years.
We're not measuring anything.
Good description. Thanks for not measuring. But let's see. I got into the tennis business when I was in high school. Actually, I loved tennis. I was a high school basketball player and frustrated baseball player. And then when I started playing tennis, that was kind of my sport. I really enjoyed it, and I got better at it. I was fortunate enough to go to a Division II school and play tennis there. And when the summers rolled around, I would get to go teach tennis with a lot of my peers that would go up to the Northeast from Tennessee and give tennis lessons and work in these adult camps. So I would, like a lot of kids, I would go to school in the season, and I would take my summers and teach at a summer camp. And when I got out of college, I had two options, right? One option was to go on and get my MBA, which was what my father expected me to go on and do with a degree in business. And the other was go to Puerto Rico and teach tennis at a resort. And
How long did that decision take? I mean, that sounds like a pretty easy one.
It took my father much longer to get his hands around my decision than it took me to make the decision. But we were both pretty headstrong. So off to Puerto Rico I went, where I spent a little bit of time teaching there in the winter, and then I'd come back and do a summer camp. And then suddenly, because I had some business education, I wound up fast tracking to become a director at a tennis at a resort at a very young age, and it just took all from there.
So you obviously learned how to sell very early too, if you're selling your parents on Puerto Rico versus NBA.
That was a tough sell, but it was okay. I did learn how to sell, and I did learn how to navigate. And after a couple of years of being in the tennis business and showing that I could actually make a decent living in it, it worked out okay.
Was that the biggest concern for your parents, which was, is this a real career? Are there legs here?
Absolutely. Like any parent, it was like, when are you going to get a real job? I mean, this is not a real job. This is not something you can do much longer than a year or so. And, I mean, we're going to get ahead, but segue into, I got involved with the USPTA when I had a director tennis job. I love the education that I got from them, and I love the education on the business part of tennis. And I always thought the business part of tennis was really intriguing for me, because at an early age, I knew I wanted to be involved in tennis. I absolutely knew that tennis was what I wanted to do. I also absolutely knew that I didn't want to be broke. And I didn't want to be poor.
So you can do both. They're not mutually exclusive.
I discovered that you could actually do both. They weren't mutually exclusive, but I knew I wanted to be involved in tennis, and I knew I wanted to make it a career. Now, at the time, the career was really different, because the career was, okay, you get on the court, you teach a bunch of lessons, you get paid. And I always thought there could be a little more to it than that. I always thought that, and I'd go to the seminars at the World Conference at a really young age, and I'd listen to the two rackets in a briefcase with Kirk Hamperman and Fernando Velasco talking about, accounting for a tennis pro. And I thought, wow, this is really a business. So, yeah, very lucky, very blessed.
So you knew you wanted to get in it as a career. Was there someone you looked up to, or was there something about the industry that what drew you to it?
I never lost my dad's voice in the back of my head saying, business is business is business is business. And so, my dad kind of kept that in the back of my mind that, okay, I've got to look at this as a career. If this is what I'm going to do, I can't just be out there, giving lessons and then, fishing and other stuff. I needed to make it a business. So my dad certainly is an inspiration, and certainly was a very influencing factor on me in making it a tennis business. Once I got into it, I have to say that one of my early kind of mentors in teaching was Jilan Maharaj, who's still teaching now at the ripe old age of, I don't know, 70-something, G1, if you're out there.
We don't need to put ages on anybody.
Okay, don't have to put ages on anybody. G1 was obviously an influence factor, as was when I got to know Tom Gullickson and Tim Gullickson.
Yep.
As coaches, I thought, geez, these are like tennis players that actually became successful coaches. So the Gullicksons and, G1 and I always admired Arthur Ashe. I don't know that I
Hometown
would say
hero
I
as
knew
well.
him well enough to be a mentor, but I did get to meet him doing some clinics, and he was my mom's favorite tennis player.
There you
So,
go. I love
there
it.
you go.
So let's take the business side that you just mentioned, and the USPTA. We've evolved this year into the Racket Sports Professionals Association.
Right.
You were involved with that decision. You were involved as a past president, also on the committee. Not an easy decision necessarily, but let's talk about the business side of tennis and/or racket sports.
Right.
How do you view this now that we've kind of gone through it? How did you see it in the beginning? And just give me your thoughts on that.
That's a pretty good way to actually have to describe it. At the beginning, obviously I was a little skeptical, and I thought to myself, geez, we're in our 90 plus coming up on the 100th anniversary. So wouldn't it be nice to extend it out to 100 years and have a big party and people jump out of cakes and all that crazy stuff? I did see that our business is changing. And, we spoke a little bit earlier. I think whenever you have a decision, I think it's always good if you, first of all, reflect on where you were, where you come from, where you are, and where you hope to go. Mm-hmm. So I think we can certainly celebrate plenty of things from USPTA and its past. I mean, when you go back to 1927, when the association was formed by a group of people who wanted to become tennis professionals and teach tennis and deliver tennis, I mean, that's a great, rich history, and that's an incredible story to tell for 90 plus years. So certainly a lot to be celebrated as the tennis teacher became a tennis professional. That's certainly worth celebrating. So that's kind of where we were and where we've been. Where we are now as a trade association is a little bit different. And as the industry's evolved into more of a racket sports, a racket sports industry, who would have known in 1940 how important and how big pickle, padel, platform, squash, how big these other sports would be. So I think where we are now, I'm very good with the decision to be RSPA. I know a lot of people aren't, and I know it's very controversial, and change is very difficult. But given where our directors and our coaches need to be now, I think it probably makes more sense to go ahead and pivot and make the change to be RSPA and acknowledge that there's an industry of racket sports professionals instead of saying we're the United States Professional Tennis Association and we can also certify you in XYZ. And, again, to come full circle of where we're going and where we're headed, I think coaches are going to be better served by understanding that under this umbrella they can get education to become a pickleball teacher or a Padel teacher or an instructor. And if you don't, there's no shame in that. That's absolutely fine. If somebody wants to just hey, I started teaching tennis and I'm going to die teaching tennis, that might actually be me. Because while I'm certified in a couple of the others, I'm mainly, certainly at my core, I'm a tennis instructor or tennis coach. So if anybody wants to stay under that umbrella and keep doing that, God bless you. You're fine. That doesn't make you a dinosaur. That just makes you a very progressive and an awesome tennis coach, tennis professional. But I think going forward, giving coaches that want more than to just do tennis, we need, as a trade association, give them that option.
And don't you think the job market has changed and the facilities changing is creating just new and different opportunities? And you could look at it half full or you can look at it half empty. And I think the half full is, oh my gosh, there's never been a better time to be in this industry.
Yeah, totally unscripted. 20 years ago, there were very few clubs that weren't all tennis clubs.
Right.
I mean, there were no other racket sports. And as you evolve now and you see that a lot of these clubs and even public facilities are adding the other racket sports in, yeah, I think the industry's different. The industry changed. So, what's that old saying that the person that survives the longest isn't the strongest or the smartest or the fastest, but they adapt the quickest and they evolve. And I think it's important that as the industry evolves and changes, we probably somewhat evolve and change with it.
Well, I hope so. And I think, in our first episode, we had Alistair talk about change and mindset and change management.
The podcast.
Exactly.
Right.
But I think what he said is it's this whole mindset. And I think it's the mindset of our industry as well, is, our industry, as a whole is about a $5 billion industry, yet most of our professionals don't choose it. They fall into it. They don't have a career path. But there's huge opportunity, and we have to help lift it up and make this, an industry. Where did you see this as you became a director? You've been in private clubs and now at a public facility. How have you seen that evolve from the responsibility you had as a director? I mean, you had a multi-million-dollar budget. Did you learn all that on the job, or how did that all work?
I learned a lot of it on the fly, candidly, and I had a great general manager, Steve Logodice, who was really good about including me in the dialogue and trying to help me understand. For a couple of reasons. He knew that I understood numbers pretty well, and I was kind of sneaky and cagey about that I would understand a P&L. But as my job at my prior club, Ibis, evolved, I started off as the tennis director, and then I took on more responsibility, and then the job that's suddenly become more fashionable, the director of sports or director of athletics or director of rackets. I oversaw the fitness center because it was in the same building and it was kind of close by and I had good proximity to it. And then I oversaw the aquatics operation in the pool, but I knew that the smartest thing I could do was hire a good pool manager that understood the day-to-day. And then, the biggest joke of all is I oversaw the spa, which still baffles my wife, how anybody would let me have anything to do with a spa. But it's management 101. The first thing you do is hire a really good spa manager that you trust, that can operate, that understands the business. And then, like a lot of businesses, you don't have to know granular what's going on, but you have to be a good leader and a manager and support them, which fortunately I was able to do.
Okay, so let's talk about being a good leader. You brought it up, and clearly you don't get elected to be USTA Florida President. You don't get elected to the national board. You don't get elected to the USPTA President role without being a good leader. What are some key things? And let's not be general, but be more specific. What specifically do you do with your teams to help them succeed?
It's very kind of you to say, because if you ask me, I would not say that I'm a leader. I would say that I'm always a good team player. And I think one of the things in these volunteer roles that I found where I was, very blessed and honored to be selected as their president, I think the first thing that you want to do is just assemble a good group of people, a good board that have different mindsets. I always believe that if I'm the smartest guy in the room, I need to find another room. Honestly. I mean, I want to have people around me that know more about just about everything that I do, and that's not me being humble, that's just me being smart. You want to make sure you have people around you that are bright, and then you want to make sure they understand that they have an opinion and they're in the room for a reason, and you want to hear what they have to say. And again, if everybody in the room has the same opinion and there are 12 people in the room, 11 of them don't need to be there. You don't need them all there. So I think if there's a leadership skill I have, it's probably been that I've always been very good at making people feel comfortable disagreeing with me. And I think that's kind of hard to do because, nobody likes to be questioned in front of other people. But I've always wanted people that could disagree with me and tell me when I'm full of, what. And I might be right and I might be wrong, but it's that kicking all four tires process of everybody looking at it from a different point of view that makes the group come up with a better decision.
Does that come from, did you experience that with someone? Did you learn it from somebody specifically? How did you come up with that mindset?
Ironically, I learned it how not to do it from somebody.
I've been there.
Yeah, been there, right?
Yeah.
We've all been there around that person who just, he's not always right, but he's certain.
Yeah, right.
That's a dangerous type of person to be around. He absolutely or she absolutely thinks this is the way it should be done, doesn't solicit input. And, I just know that there are people like that, and I've worked for people like that, and this is what I say, and I'm the boss, and bam. And I never wanted to be like that. I never liked my friend. I never wanted to have friends like that. I think it's okay to be opinionated, but you need to always be curious and open.
I love that word. Speaking of the, we're going to go into that curious and open. So we both come from a tennis background,
Right.
Solid tennis, and yet we're now in a racket sports world.
Right.
Why will tennis always be the core of not only who we are, but of our industry? What are your thoughts about, because tennis is growing in so many different spots, but it's in a threat in other spots. I mean, there's a lot going on, not only in tennis, but also in the future. What do you think?
I have a couple of thoughts on that. And one is, and again, this is just very, very simple. I think, and I mentioned this yesterday to a group of coaches, competition does one or two things to you. You either cower and can't handle it and you lose, or you improve and get better and you take on the challenge. And I think actually having other racket sports that somewhat compete with tennis is actually a good thing, because number one, tennis can take almost something from every other racket sport and learn something. I mean, they're, pickleball, say it. They're great with casual play. They're really killing it with casual play. So maybe tennis focused a little bit too long on that top little piece of the pyramid and didn't worry about building that groundswell underneath of recreational players, which we need in order to, pathway and grow up. I think that you need competition, but I think tennis will always be at the center of everything, just because, first of all, I think when we hear about these other racket sports growing and, at the end of the day, tennis still has an incredible room to grow. It still has an incredible upside. And if you think about it, we've continued to grow, or at the very least, and I know there are people who say, oh, it's BS. It's not growing. It's, pickleball, or Padel. And those are all great racket sports. But I think tennis will always have a base of players. And we've done this the past few years despite a couple of things. We are woefully short of coaches. We do not have enough coaches, entry-level coaches, teaching at public parks. We don't have enough. Our infrastructure is really old. A lot of the public tennis centers were built in the 80s and the 90s. And like I talked about a little bit yesterday when we were having a one-off, when was the last time you saw an old pickleball court? You haven't, because they're all 5 years new. They're all new. So if we can solve the dilemma that tennis has of, we need more coaches, we need better entry-level coaches, we need to be really good at teaching beginners. How do we solve this infrastructure problem, which, in the Northeast, you're limited to indoor courts, and then you go outside and people haven't made improvements to the public parks in decades. So how do we crack that problem with the infrastructure and have a welcoming place to play? Despite that, tennis actually grew. So when we start solving those two issues and really wrapping our hands around how do we do this, there's a huge upside to tennis. And I think it'll always be the central sport, certainly at clubs and most facilities.
Well, and I think you said this when we were chatting earlier, is, tennis it teaches you how to organize. It teaches you how to manage leagues and tournaments and fulfilling activity. And activity is what is key for any facility, whether despite your racket sport.
Right.
How do you feel like tennis has trained you to program really, really well?
Overall, I think, tennis teaches you, good tennis directors can teach tennis, but they're also very good play facilitators. They're also very good at getting people engaged and getting people on the court to teach and to play and to help people. You have a beginner and you teach them lessons, and you don't really want them to be a lesson taker until they're, for like 5 years. You want them as quickly as you can to get them in that pathway of playing in their own and doing clinics and team practices. I think those skills, because tennis directors and tennis pros have been around longer, I think that's why, one of the biggest sources of good pickleball instructors and good racket sports directors, it's not the new person that just came out of the woodwork and decided they were going to teach Padel or teach squash or teach pickleball. Those are people that probably have a background in tennis. Why? Because like we said, they're already good at communicating with people. They're good at being organized and understanding how to run a business. And they're really good, if they're good, they're really good at programming. And I know that in my area down in South Florida, all of a sudden these pickleball leagues are starting. And the people that are just coming in cold that have never had any tennis experience in leagues, they know where all the warts and potholes are in leagues. So they know how to figure out, okay, we've got to have team formation. You have to have a captain. You have to have some hierarchy of who plays what line. And if you haven't done that with a men's or a ladies league and know how to form them, you're gonna be like pulling your hair out 2 weeks into your pickleball league. But the ones that have done it, if they apply the same practices of fairness that they used in their tennis leagues to the pickleball leagues or Padel leagues or whatever they're doing, they're going to be incredibly successful because the format, the formula doesn't really change.
Right. Well, I think you bring up a good one too, and it's that organization and communication that is critical. And I think really good tennis people who get into the racket sports world, they do that so well, and that's their kind of their secret sauce.
Yeah.
And I think that the other part of that secret sauce is energy. And
absolutely.
And I think our industry needs more and more energy. Where do you think that comes from going forward? You talk about where we are today and where the future comes from. Where does the energy come from?
I think a lot of the energy has to be from within the people. You have to recruit people that are very enthusiastic about teaching and communicating in racket sports. That to me is the secret sauce on energy. You want competent people, but at the same time you want passion, right? You want that person that's passionate about helping others, and tennis is the vehicle if they deliver it. We know tennis is, we'll talk a little bit later about how healthy it is and, the benefits of playing tennis. But you want somebody that can deliver that passion. You want somebody that has the, like I like teaching tennis still,
mm-hmm.
and I do it as much as I can. But I still get juiced up watching students succeed. Yesterday on the campus,
Yeah.
lady from Wellington was there. I left the training to go watch a couple of sets of her tennis as she, battled her way through the 3-5. I still see my students' successes to an extent as my success, and I really, I still can get jazzed up about it. But I think you got to find people that are kind of like-minded, that really want to see people succeed, want to see people have a good experience, and you need to look for enthusiastic tennis teachers. You don't want the teachers that are in it for the buck,
mm-hmm.
because I got out of college and my business hopes and dreams didn't really work out the way. So maybe I should just give some lessons for a while. Those people are so transparent that they're just in it for money, or they're in it for something else. You need people that are very passionate about helping other people and serving other people and helping share what you know with them.
So is that your why?
That's totally my why. That's totally
that
my
comes
why.
across very clearly.
Right, Simon Sinek.
Yep.
That's my, when I was, again, we had a coach's workshop all over the whole weekend, and I started off by explaining to him, why am I here? It's a holiday weekend, and I could be in South Florida watching the football games, and why am I here? Because I think coaching's really important. And I think it's important enough to where I should give back and take some time and try to help.
So talking about coaching and the industry, how do you sell people on the job as a coach and or becoming a professional? Like what's your pitch to somebody who's a college freshman or a high school player or somebody to get them into the industry? What's the hook?
I think the hook, and I'm he'd be embarrassed that I'm using his name, but Bill Mountford said something to me years back as I was starting to get to know Bill, and he was relaying a story that one of his mentors told him, that if you want to make a difference, tennis is the way you can do it. So I think the hook for tennis to me has always been the ability to actually make a difference. I mean, I could probably sell real estate. I'd probably be reasonably good at it. Oh, who knows? I might suck at it. But I might be bad at selling real estate. But I'm pretty sure I could do it. Could I make a living? Probably. Could I have been a broker or been in some form of business and sales? I'd like to think I probably could have done that. But how much of a difference would I have made? I don't really think I would have been, come on. I wouldn't have been like real impactful like legends. I would, and not that I'm that way with tennis too. But I know that through tennis, I can make a difference in like high school kids and juniors and with ladies teams and with coaches. I can certainly help them understand, that you can make a difference. So my elevator pitch to someone who loved tennis and loved people, that this is a great job that you could actually make a difference with people and yourself and your community.
I love it. I think that's one of the things
Doesn't
that
that sound corny
it
as hell, though?
No, but
Come on, that's corny.
a little corny. But,
All right,
but
that's okay, but it's honest.
But you're talking to corny people.
All right.
I mean, when you're passionate about this
It's
sport.
honest.
But I think, one of the things that is in our tennis ecosystem is, you play juniors, you play tournaments, you grow up, you see people helping you at a tournament or guiding you to do this and this and this. And then you feel like you owe the sport. Don't you feel? I mean, I think that's where the USTA comes in really well in the sections is all of us feel like the sport has given to us, therefore we have to give back.
Being a volunteer for the USTA Florida section is probably one of the most humbling, fulfilling things I've ever done. And I used to always go home because I'd have a weekend away, and Amanda would look at my wife and she'd say, "Where are you going this weekend?" Really? And what is that? USTA, RSPA, USPTA?
Yeah.
Where are you going this weekend? And I would jokingly say, "I'm going to spend some time with my do-gooders."
There you go.
Because they were just the section to me are the ultimate do-gooders. The programs that we run, whether it's Special Olympics or junior tennis, and helping open facilities and grants to HBCUs, the stuff that we do and that I'm able to not necessarily drive because we have people that can drive that bus, but just supporting those initiatives is really pretty cool, and it's really good, and it's nice to feel like I'm a part of it and a part of. And tennis has its naysayers, and the USTA will have its naysayers, as will RSPA. We always will. But being a part of something that's good about tennis and good about the USTA Florida section is just really, really fulfilling. And I always use that term, do-gooders, because, you go to a Special Olympics weekend at the campus and you see the looks on the parents, and it makes you want to come back. And what it does, it's like it's like 1,000 points of light, right?
Right.
Like I go back, and now in Wellington, I proudly host a Love Serving Autism. I've taken on Gold Coast Down syndrome program with kids learning tennis and having good experience on the tennis court. Our outreach goes to now the Boys and Girls Club, where I was able to help get a coach over there. It's just really, really fulfilling knowing that you can make a difference and you have the bandwidth to make a difference.
You say that make a difference, and I actually think volunteering is being pretty selfish, because you give and it makes you feel so much better about yourself and about what you're doing than you might make those others feel great too. But oh boy, does it make you feel great too.
I mean, and I think it's helpful that I kind of grew up that way, and I keep coming back to my dad. But I can remember my dad taking weekends off and going to a camp in rural West Virginia to build bunk beds for kids. And it would be like, Dad, because my dad was in the furniture business. So my dad would go and just tell people to have
the best bunk beds I've ever seen.
Oh, they were probably great bunk beds, right? But my dad would go do that. My dad was always involved in Big Brothers. And so I had these, I'd have two kids that would go to the games with us. Part of my dad. My mom would volunteer for everything. And I think, to your point, it does make you feel good. And I think, if you're, again, I get a little corny, but if you're lucky enough to get up in the morning and you're somewhat healthy and it's a nice day and you can do something to improve someone else's day, I think you kind of have an obligation to do it. And plus, when you do it, you feel, at least you can feel somewhat good about it. That's why tennis is the greatest vehicle to actually help make people's day, because, with a lot of times you have a ladies team member and she struggled and she lost. And just if you can be that, or a kid who just came back from a tournament who played the round robin and lost all 3 of his matches. If you can have the skill to say to that person, hey, look, this is a process. It's part of getting better. You'll get better, and this will make you a better player. because you're going to work harder. You're going to discover what you did that wasn't so good, and you're going to focus on your weaknesses. And if the next time you win more games or you come closer to winning, that's improvement. Because tennis is, like, I always thought tennis was kind of cool because, as you know, the better you get, the more you realize you're not very good.
Right, exactly.
Right? I mean, at the end of the day, there's only one person holding the trophy.
Exactly.
And
everybody
else lost every week. And if you can somehow relate that message to whether it's a kid or a gentleman you're teaching or a ladies league player, if you can relay, look, half the people lose, and at a given tournament, we're just going to have the Australian. I mean, when it's a 128 draw, there are 127 people lose.
Only one with a trophy.
You know, if you can make their day a little bit better by just explaining, probably more so on their low moments than on their high moments. I mean, everybody likes to high five when they won, but you know, you want to be able to be that coach or that instructor that can, you know, kind of keep them on track when they're about to, you know, lose it or quit.
Well, it's like that. We're going to age both of us, but you know that commercial when the dad gives the lifesaver and says, "Can I have the whole roll?"
Oh, God, you must be older than me.
No, I look it. Yeah.
No. It's a job. It's aging you.
So Dr. Jack Groppel came out a few years ago. We won't age him either, but 36 reasons to play tennis and stuff like that. And now there's been research from Denmark about tennis lives nine years longer if you play tennis and things like that. How have you kind of tried to communicate that, and how should we as a tennis ecosystem or a racket sports ecosystem communicate the health benefit of tennis, especially in today's world of blue screens and sedentary lives and things like that?
Right. I think if you can communicate to just about anyone, whether they're an adult beginner or a junior, you know, tennis has always had two things that really just are, I think, better than any other sport. Obviously, it's very healthy. Mm-hmm. You know, when you're out there playing tennis, and I'm not just talking about physically healthy, the workout is good. But if you can get out on the court, you know, several times a week and just rally and hit balls and focus on your footwork, which I'm really bad at these days. But if you can focus on moving your feet and striking the tennis ball correctly and you know, running down a ball or two and enjoying the physical part of it, that's really good. The mental part of it is, you know, now you're focused. You can kind of forget about might be going on in the shop or what might be going on out there. Like, you know, an hour of tennis to me is, I love to do it because it's healthy, but I also like to do it because it's a getaway and just kind of clean my head. It's better than taking a walk. It's therapy. And the other thing is socially, you know, it's one of the best sports you can find. I mean, it was kind of neat going to visit the campus yesterday and watch all the different levels of play in the state NTRP sectionals, because I don't even know their names, but I saw two ladies that must have been in the 4.0 playing singles, and to watch them, you know, give good calls to one another and compliment one another after a good shot, and then, you know, shake hands after a close match. I mean, you know, that's good stuff there. When you can get out and socially compete, and, you know, I love our ladies teams, but when they can kind of form bonds from their teams and include people and have fun together and go out at night together, I think tennis is probably physically, it's the best sport. Socially, it's certainly the best sport because it just allows you to find bonds. I mean, look, come on, we wouldn't know each other if not for tennis.
Exactly. Right.
We wouldn't have known each other if not for tennis.
Right.
And like most people in tennis, you develop lifetime bonds. I mean, I'll pick up the phone and call Tom McGraw or Tom Douglas, who are both, you know, served on the board with me. And, you know, we were very passionate board members, but more importantly, we just became lifelong friends. And I can pick up the phone and, you know, we share each other's successes and failures, and, you know, you just develop lifelong friendships.
Well, I think it's interesting is that you can walk into a room and find a tennis player and have an immediate bond.
I forgot Harry Gilbert.
Oh, there you go.
Poor Harry Gilbert. Sorry, Harry, I didn't mean to forget you, dude. And whoever else I might have forgotten. But, you know, Harry's a member of that 7 a.m. club that gets the call because we know we're early risers. So sorry.
It. No, that's okay. I think it's that instant bond. And I think once you know somebody has gone through something you have, I mean, I tell my kids, you know, how do you meet friends? It's shared experiences, shared beliefs. And these shared experiences that you find on the tennis court, or the shared people and things like that, I think is an ecosystem that is it's a culture that is really, really important.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay, so let's shift a little bit and talk about the RSPA tomorrow. And as a former national board member, and you've seen the evolution, we had a conversation actually when I was going through the hiring process. And I asked the board a question, and I'll never forget this. I said, why should I take the job? And your answer was, you remember?
I remember. And I said, if you were to ask, I said, Brian, I can't answer this for you, but I can answer it for me.
Right.
And I would say, because I don't think there's a job in tennis where you can influence the sport more than to be the CEO of the at the time USPTA. I said, because think of the reach you'll have. You'll be able to influence coaching across the country, which is the single most important thing to our sport right now, in my opinion.
And that's exactly what you said, and
you took the job.
Well, not only that,
I'm a good salesperson
too,
dude.
That's where I was going to validate. Yes, Chuck can sell, but that was a pretty awesome statement, and it's a pretty awesome responsibility. And thank goodness we've got a great board right now. We've got a great executive committee. We've got a great executive directors. But if you were to make a recommendation or see what the future of the RSPA looks like, where would you see us going, or what do you recommend, knowing what you know?
Knowing what I know, I think, as a trade association, one of the most important things you can do is impact their jobs. Just impact their jobs. Find a way, whether it's working with the governing body or working with parks or working with whatever bodies are out there, try to make the jobs for coaches better. Have more jobs, better jobs, and have those jobs be sustainable. Like I said, a coach in his 20s is going to look different than a coach in their 40s or her 40s, and will certainly look different from a coach in his or her 60s. So if you can provide that constant pathway to make their jobs better, I think you've really succeeded. And I still stand by the fact that coaches are the key to, and coaches, entry-level coaches, providers are the key to making the sport grow. And I'm all about I'm all about great digital platforms. Mm-hmm. I think those are wonderful. But I do think it's interesting that one sport has grown exponentially, and nobody can tell me about their digital platform.
That's exactly
all right.
Yeah.
So what does that tell me? That tells me that it's still a sport, and it's still a game that's learned by hands-on touches and personal experiences, having friends that play, and being a welcoming sport that brings you in face-to-face. And that's the way we ultimately grow and get more players.
When you look at your...
And that might not always be a popular view.
But okay. I think that's one of the greatest things about our sport, and why it succeeded in COVID, and why pickleball did too, and other racket sports, is because it is, I think you even said it earlier today, play at a distance, community together.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's such a, but it is such a personal sport, and it is
Very
such
much.
a personal learning, but also a personal experience sport.
Very much so.
In your experience with USPTA, now RSPA, who influenced your career? Who did you look towards? Who did you ask questions to? How did you use the network of the membership to help? Maybe it wasn't career specifically, but how did you use the network?
That's a good question. But when I started off on the Florida section board, I was very lucky because I had people like Frank Swope and Lynn Samard and Trish Faulkner is always, who's the current president. Trish Faulkner has always been a source of, I think we kind of mentor each other, because she's always been a good, sounding board, as have, Lynn and Harry Gilbert and Frank Swope and a lot of the others. They're always very good. They're always willing to help. So that network of coaches and network of professionals that you can kind of surround yourself with, and I think one thing that's important is to know that circle changes and that circle grows as you're in the business longer, because, who would have known 15 years ago, I barely knew who Wendy Tatum was. And now Wendy Tatum is at Palm Beach Gardens, runs a great municipal tennis center, probably 20 minutes away from mine. And we both have very large, robust programs. But I know if I'm struggling with anything, I pick up the phone and call Wendy. New circle of friends. I'll call Trish about anything, because she knows it usually.
She might be the most interesting person in the world.
Yeah,
the more you dig in, right?
If she could be the Dos Equis dude,
exactly.
If there's a Dos Equis woman,
it's her
in tennis.
Absolutely,
I'm pretty sure it's Trish, right?
I love it. So you got into this, you got into tennis, you knew you wanted it to be a career. When did you realize or think, or was there a moment where you thought, okay, I'm in for good?
Some things you do in your life are very intentional, like you have a path and you see a vision. And for mine, I think it was kind of lucky a little bit. I'd have to say, in all fairness, I was at the right place at the right time. I mean, and, just again, through no brilliant plan of my own, I got out of school and the tennis boom was going on.
Right.
And I happened to be that person that got out of school, and where a lot of the tennis directors didn't have a real strong business acumen. I'd studied business in college. So I understood just enough about accounting to get me, where I needed to be interested, and enough about marketing. So I thought it was interesting that at the time I could talk to the gentleman who ran Top Notch, at the time, Jack Cummings, and I could actually explain to him why it was a good idea to build more courts. And I would say, well, you're actually just shifting numbers on a balance sheet, because if you take cash and put it into fixed assets, you can depreciate the assets, and debt service on the tennis courts will be covered by X number of new memberships. And he went, whoa, this long blonde hair tennis dude that I've got is, maybe he's got some, something in his brain.
If you were going to tell your former self, if you're looking back at you in your 20s, based on what you know now, what would you tell yourself?
Be an avid reader, which I tried to be. Be an avid reader. Try to be well versed. Continue to be curious. Mm-hmm. Try to learn as much as you can from people that know more than you. And believe me, when I was in my 20s, just about everybody knew more than me. So I was seeking out everybody I could that could give me advice on how to navigate this tennis business career. Always be curious, read a lot, and be kind to everybody. I would say that years ago, I became a CMAA member. And my boss, Steve Logodice, was very supportive about me going to the seminars. And one thing that I learned was that, a lot of the lead club managers in the country did not all go to Cornell Hotel School or hospitality school. Right. A lot of times they are people who learn the business on the fly. They really learn the business on the fly. A lot of them started off as golf directors. If you're a golf director, you start off in the bag room. If you were a food and beverage manager, you typically started off, some of them as dishwashers and some of them as maitre d's and waiters. And, one thing that always stuck with me to tell my assistant pros is, if you go into a restaurant at the club, you should be nice to every server, because chances are better that they will be your next boss than someone who looks like me. And it was pretty impactful, and it's absolutely true. So, yeah, if I had to give advice to somebody that was coming up in the business, especially if they were in the club business or even not in the club business, because it's just the right thing to do. But boy, oh boy, be kind and be nice to everybody, because you never know. You pass people on the escalator of life, and sometimes they're headed up, exactly, and sometimes they're headed down, and sometimes you're going this way. But be nice to everybody, because you never know who you're going to pass on the other way.
I love that. That's actually really good. What's your definition of hospitality? How would you explain hospitality to one of your new pros or one of your new staff members?
Service, just simple service. Hospitality is all about serving people and understanding that it's not about you, it's about them. And I when I spoke about giving lessons one time to a number of coaches, I said, look, you got to understand that it's not how well you can teach, it's how well you can help them learn. It has nothing to do with you. So, the coach that says, man, I ran a great practice. Well, unfortunately, you don't get to judge whether or not the practice was good. You had 16 ladies out there, and if 10 of them thought it was horrible, it was horrible. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Right. It's not about it really isn't about you anymore. When you're in the hospitality business, it's all about how you can provide things and make other people feel good and have a good experience.
Okay, Chuck, if you were commissioner for a day. Commissioner for a day.
People are shaking.
People should be shaking.
Should be shaking.
What would you do?
Let's see. Okay, kind of random, but if I could be the commissioner for a day, I would flood every public tennis center courts with competent instructors and coaches that could teach beginners how to play. I would find a way to make it happen. I wouldn't start with, bold, unattainable goals, but I would work towards trying to make sure that every public tennis center had plenty of coaches that could teach beginners. And I would try to make it as affordable as I could. And if not affordable, at least make it free and try to have people out there. I would advocate to restore all of our public tennis courts. And I would make sure that in the Northeast and the cold weather places, there was an affordable option to play tennis indoors. Because there's a reason that tennis is perceived as a sport for the elite and wealthy. And that's because in many parts of the country it is still. I would have here's a bold, audacious goal. I would have the tennis player Bill of Rights, that a tennis player at a public park should have the same experience that a tennis player at a hoity-toity country club should have. Shouldn't be any different. It should be they should be welcomed. They should have a nice, clean court and a clean net and water fountains and some shade. They should have the same experience that people at a hoity-toity public club. And I've been at everything. I've been at resorts, I've been at clubs, and now I'm at a public tennis center. And I think most of the people at the Village of Wellington would agree that I've worked very hard since I've been there to make sure that the experience there, whether it's the quality of courts and the awnings and the facility, is going to be second to none. I would have one teaching pro association. I think it's just silly that we still duplicate efforts. And we, two associations, do kind of the same thing, and there's way too much duplication of efforts, and there's way too much thinking about how that'll impact each other's membership. I think one teaching pro association geared towards educating coaches, getting more coaches, better coaches, and making their jobs viable while not competing against each other would be a really logical solution. And then it would be, and again, I think the governing body has to help in that effort because they have the bandwidth and they have the biggest interest in growing the sport. And I will really push, while anybody will listen to me, that we need more and better coaches, and we need to make sure that happens.
And I think you're right. I think, and I said this at a meeting a couple of weeks ago, is acronym agnostic. It doesn't matter which acronym you work under. We're all in the same business, and we're all in the same goal of growing tennis, growing racket sports, growing healthy people, growing communities, and things like that. Yeah. And as you said that about the governing body, I think you're exactly right. I think if they can bring another 25 to 50,000 coaches in, and if those people want to stay in the business, we'll make them professionals. And I think that's our role in that, is that bring them in. It's almost like, they set them up as the pitcher and we knock them out as the batter. And I think that's a great way that we can work together.
I think it's a great way to logically have a vision of how everybody can have a place at the table. I think that's a really great vision.
This has been amazing. Okay, last question for you.
No.
Yes,
Is
last
it easy?
one. No. What is a story? You've been interviewed 100 times. I've listened to most of them. Your answers are kind of standard, so it's time to go out of your comfort zone. Tell us a story nobody's ever heard, or that nobody knows about you, that had a really big impact. A person, an experience, or something that had a really big impact on your life that helps keep you motivated and passionate for what you do today.
I guess I'm sure I'll think of a better one when I'm gone, but I'm trying to think of a story, something that happened to me that had to do with maybe persistence, and I think you'll learn a lot by your successes, but I also think you learn a lot more by your failures. And I remember when I was young, I was the smallest kid on my basketball team, believe it or not, now that I'm 6'3". And I just remember what it was like to be the outsider, to be on a team that was very diverse, and I was the outsider. And I learned what it was like to be the shortest person. And I never really thought of this as being a story, but I think it probably has something to do with, number one, keeping me humble, because, I'm not just, I'm a coach.
Uh-huh.
I'm a tennis teacher. I'm a coach. That's what I do. That's at my core. And understanding what it's like to, at least I hope, treat everybody with respect, whether or not they look and act and think like me. I think those experiences of playing basketball and being the only, being diverse, and that I was who I was, and being kind of short, and sitting in a room with people that are just at USTA meetings that are much brighter than I am, certainly better educated, and have more tennis DNA than I ever had. But I think learning how to be a little different. I'll lean into it. I'll embrace it. I know I've been the person that was the outsider a lot, and I don't know if that's really a story, but lean into being different. If you're different, lean into it and embrace it, and call yourself lucky, I guess.
Love that. I think that just it means you're authentic, and I think people really respect authentic than you would just knowing that they're sucking up for a reason.
What's the country music song? I'd rather you hate me for who I am than love me for who I'm not.
Exactly. Well, Chuck, this has been a blast. Thanks for joining us on the second episode of Rackets United. Chuck, thanks. Good luck with your presidency.
Hey, thanks, Brian.
This has been a blast.
Looking forward to it. Thank you.